Chapter 18 of Abraham Lincoln, A History, Volume 8. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Cal Taylor, Conestoga, Pennsylvania. Abraham Lincoln, A History, Volume 8, by John Hay and John George Nicolay. Tennessee Free. The appointment of Andrew Johnson as military governor of Tennessee, and his assumption of active duty at Nashville in the spring of 1862 have been mentioned. The successive Union victories at Fort Donelson, Shiloh, Corinth, and Memphis seem to have completely paralyzed rebellion in the middle and western portions of the state. Various Union manifestations in the shape of public meetings and conventions, occurring at Nashville, Columbia, Murfreesboro, Shelbyville, and perhaps other places, indicated that popular thought was turning towards a restoration of civil government under federal authority. This tendency, however, was arrested when in the autumn Bragg conceived and executed his daring invasion of Kentucky. Even after his forced retreat and the severe losses which the Union Army inflicted on him in the battles of Perryville in October, and of Murfreesboro on December 31, 1862, it was apparent that the federal military control in Tennessee was not yet permanently assured, and this uncertainty blighted such official efforts at reconstruction as were set on foot. President Lincoln had hoped for more favorable results in this direction. He had written to Governor Johnson and to General Grant on October 21st a letter which was in substance a copy of which on October 14 he sent to the military governor of Louisiana, requesting that an opportunity be given to the people of Tennessee to hold a popular election for members of Congress, state officers, and the legislature, his primary object being to awaken and crystallize dormant Union sentiment, with a view as much as possible to detach captured localities and generally insurrectionary states from their military support to the rebellion. Both Governor Johnson and General Grant complied with the President's request so far as to publish orders for holding an election on December 29th to fill vacancies in the 37th Congress for 9th and 10th congressional districts of Tennessee. But though the Union voters were alert and made an effort to choose representatives, the rebel General Forrest planned and executed an extensive raid on that day, which prevented the election being held. Neither was there any early improvement in the political situation. For 6 months after the Battle of Murfreesboro, General Rosecrans made no forward movement. This left the strong rebel army of Bragg planted near the center of the state, where its mere presence was sufficient to deter Unionists from openly declaring their loyalty, except such of the bolder leaders as has been outspoken against secession and rebellion through all the incidents and fluctuations of the war. From time to time they encouraged each other and kept alive what there was of latent loyalty by meetings, speeches, and resolutions. On the 1st of July, 1863, a Union convention met at Nashville, which had been called by a committee consisting of W.G. Brownlow, Horace Maynard, and 13 others. 40 counties were represented, though only partially by regularly chosen delegates, many of them simply enrolling their names as citizens. They took an oath of allegiance to the United States, and in their resolutions pronounced void the various succession laws and ordinances. They further declared it to be virtually important to elect a legislature and invited Governor Johnson to issue writs of election as soon as expedient. But it was clear to all prudent observers that the time was not yet ripe for such a step. General Hurlbut, writing from Memphis, under date of August 11, in answer to the President's letter of July 31 about Reconstruction in Arkansas, said, "As to Tennessee, I am satisfied that this State is ready, by overwhelming majorities, to repeal the act of secession, establish a fair system of gradual emancipation, and tender herself back to the Union. I have discouraged any action on this subject here until East Tennessee is delivered. When that is done, so that her powerful voice may be heard, Let Governor Johnson call an election for members of the legislature, and that legislature call a convention, and in 60 days the work will be done. It was not long before the favorable conjuncture that's outlined seemed to have arrived. Rosecrans at length moved forward, forced Bragg by slow degrees southward to the state line, and on September 9 marched, unopposed, into Chattanooga. Coincident with this, Burnside, at the head of the Army of the Ohio, moved forward from Kentucky into East Tennessee, entering Knoxville on September 4. Hard fighting was still to be done to hold these points, but this also was successfully accomplished when Burnside, on November 29, repulsed Longstreet, and when, by the Battle of Chattanooga on November 24, the army of Bragg at length suffered disastrous defeat. Meanwhile, President Lincoln, not losing a moment of time after hearing of the occupation of Chattanooga, and studying his moves on the political chessboard as unremittingly as those on the military, wrote to Governor Johnson under the date of September 11. All Tennessee is now clear of armed insurrectionists. You need not be reminded that it is the nick of time for reinaugurating a loyal state government. Not a moment should be lost. You and the cooperating friends there can be better judge of the ways and means that can be judged by any here. I only offer a few suggestions. The reinauguration must not be such as to give control of the state and its representation in Congress to the enemies of the Union, driving its friends there into political exile. The whole struggle for Tennessee will have been profitless to both state and nation if it so ends that Governor Johnson is put down and Governor Harris is put up. It must not be so. You must have it otherwise. Let the reconstruction be the work of such men only as can be trusted for the Union. Exclude all others and trust that your government, so organized, will be recognized here as being the one of Republican form to be guaranteed to the state, and to be protected against invasion and domestic violence. It is something on the question of time to remember that it cannot be known to who is next to occupy the position I now hold, nor what he will do. I see that you have declared in favor of emancipation in Tennessee, for which may God bless you. Get emancipation into your new state government, Constitution, and there will be no such word as fail for your case. The raising of colored troops, I think, will greatly help everywhere. The foregoing letter of general advice the President followed up a week later by sending the governor these additional documents, investing him with full powers to execute the work he was requested to do. Herewith I send you a paper, substantially the same as the one drawn by yourself and mentioned in your dispatch, but slightly changed in two particulars. First, yours was so drawn that I authorized you to carry into effect the fourth section, etc., whereas I so modify it as to authorize you to act as to require the United States to carry into effect that section. Secondly, you had a clause committing me to some sort to the state constitution of Tennessee, which I feared might embarrass you in making a new constitution if you desire, so I dropped that clause. This letter contained an enclosure which further said, in addition to the matters contained in the orders and instructions given you by the Secretary of War, you are hereby authorized to exercise such powers as may be necessary and proper to enable the loyal people of Tennessee to present such a Republican form of state government as will entitle the state to the guarantee of the United States therefor, and to be protected under such state government by the United States against invasion and domestic violence, all according to the fourth section of the fourth article of the Constitution of the United States. For a month or more after these letters were sent, military operations about Chattanooga created anxious suspense, and before it was entirely believed by the full news following the Battle of Lookout Mountain, the President had issued his amnesty and Reconstruction Proclamation of December 8. 1863. The great pressure of business both at Washington and Nashville, and the midwinter weather created still further delay. About the middle of January, however, the President sent to Tennessee, as he had done to Louisiana, Arkansas, and elsewhere, an agent with blank books and instructions to begin and push forward the work of enrolling citizens willing to take the oath prescribed in the Amnesty and Reconstruction Proclamation. Governor Johnson, on his part, was by this time also ready to begin Reconstruction proceedings. A large public meeting was held at Nashville, January 21, at which he made a stirring speech, using his afterwards famous phrase that treason must be made odious, traitors must be punished and impoverished, declaring slavery dead, and that political reorganization must leave it altogether out of view. The meeting passed resolutions recommending a constitutional convention and pledging their influence to elect only such men as delegates to said convention as shall be in favor of immediate and universal emancipation. The governor, however, was resolved to build the new political structure with the greatest caution. To this end, on January 26, 1864, he issued a proclamation ordering election on the first Saturday in March only for county officers, justices of the peace, sheriffs, constables, trustees, circuit and county court clerks, registers, and tax collectors. It was not easy immediately to restore the goodwill which theoretically goes hand in hand with peace. The passions of civil war were made doubly bitter by rebel persecutions of Union men in East Tennessee. Excited loyalists found fault with the Amnesty Proclamation because of its excessive liberality to repentant rebels and its placing them in the same category with men always loyal. It is galling in the extreme, wrote Horace Maynard, to many of our best Union men, officers, and soldiers in the Army, and others, to be transmitted to prosperity, as they express it, on the same record with men reeking with treason. The governor, therefore, framed the oath of allegiance in his own proclamation a little more stringently than that in the President's, and in this variance naturally produced discussion and delay, and brought new protest and appeals to the President. In reply, he telegraphed to Maynard, "Of course Governor Johnson will proceed with reorganization as the exigencies of the case appear to him to require. I do not apprehend he will think it necessary to deviate from my views to any ruinous extent. On one hasty reading I see no such deviation in his program, which you send." And to Warren Jordan, "In county elections you had better stand by Governor Johnson's plan, otherwise you will have conflict and confusion. I have seen his plan." Still further explanation was given in another letter a week later. "Your telegram of the 26th instant, asking for a copy of my dispatch to Warren Jordan, Esquire, at Nashville Press Office, has just been referred to me by Governor Johnson. In my reply to Mr. Jordan, which was brief and hurried, I intended to say that in the county and the state elections of Tennessee, the oath prescribed in the proclamation of Governor Johnson on the 26th of January, 1864, ordering an election in Tennessee on the first Saturday in March next, is entirely satisfactory to me as a test of loyalty of all persons proposing or offering to vote in said election, and coming from him would better be observed and followed. There is no conflict between the oath of amnesty in my proclamation of 8th December, 1863, and that prescribed by Governor Johnson in his proclamation of the 26th ultimo. No person who has taken the oath of amnesty of 8th December, 1863, and obtained a pardon thereby, and who intends to observe the same in good faith, should have any objection to taking that prescribed by Governor Johnson as a test of loyalty. I have seen and examined Governor Johnson's proclamation, and am entirely satisfied with his plan, which is to restore the state government and place it under the control of citizens truly loyal to the government of the United States. The proposed election was duly held. Such returns of this election of March 5 as have become public and accessible are so meager that they afford no sufficient data for general historical conclusions. Doubtless, the event was influential in confirming and renewing the faith of loyalists, but probably its larger result was drawing the attention of repentant rebels to the chances it offered to rehabilitate themselves and their political rights through the President's proclamation of amnesty. We may infer that the incident created much commitment and inquiry in this particular, for on the 26th of March, President Lincoln issued a supplementary proclamation explaining and defining that of the previous 8th of December, to the extent of excluding from its provisions prisoners of war in confinement or on parole, or prisoners held for other offenses. It is evident that the success of the county elections in March was not such as to prompt an immediate popular movement towards full state reconstruction, as been hoped by Governor Johnson and the President. The question sank into abeyance until again prompted by the irrepressible Union leaders of East Tennessee. The conventions held in that region in the early part of 1861, which protested so energetically against secession, seem to have kept their organization alive, to a certain extent, by a sort of permanent committee. This committee appears to have assembled a convention at Knoxville in April or May 1864 to discuss Reconstruction. It would seem that the meeting was divided into sentiment over the slavery question and made two reports, one favoring the Crittenden resolution, the other demanding emancipation, and this antagonism probably prevented further action, for we will next find a call signed by Brownlow and others for a new convention, which was held in Nashville on September 5, 1864. Some 40 or 50 counties were again represented, but as before, many of them by irregular or volunteer delegates. Nevertheless, they held a spirited meeting and outlined a comprehensive program. They recommended the election of a constitutional convention and the abolition of slavery in the state, and also made provisions for taking part in the approaching presidential election. This program was, however, only partially carried out. On September 30, Governor Johnson issued his proclamation for holding the presidential election, and the Union voters cast their ballots for electors of president and vice president, so far as the unsettled condition of military operations permitted. On September 30, Governor Johnson issued his proclamation for holding the presidential election, and the Union voters cast their ballots for electors of president and vice presidents, so far as the unsettled condition of military operations permitted. It does not appear that at the election of November 1864 any attempt was made to choose a governor or legislature or constitutional convention for Tennessee, but the convention which met in July constituted an executive committee consisting of 5 members for each division of the state. This executive committee, after the presidential election was over, issued calls for a state convention to meet in Nashville on December 19, 1864. "The people meet," said the call, "to take such steps as wisdom may direct to restore the state of Tennessee to its once honored status in the great national Union. If you cannot meet in your counties, come upon your own personal responsibility. It is the assembling of Union men for the restoration of their own commonwealth to life and a career of success." It turned out that the contemplated meeting could not take place on a day designated, because of the advance of the rebel army under Hood upon Nashville, and the meeting was therefore postponed to January 9, 1865. By that time, the Battle of Nashville had once more freed Tennessee from hostile occupation, and the appointed state convention assembled. 58 counties and some regiments were represented by about 467 delegates, who deliberated 6 days. The main act of the convention was in the following words: "We, the people of the state of Tennessee and of the United States of America, in convention assembled, do propound the following alterations and amendments to the Constitution, which, when ratified by the sovereign loyal people, shall be and constitute a part of the permanent Constitution of the State of Tennessee. Article 1, Section 1, that slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, are hereby forever abolished and prohibited throughout the state. Section 2. The legislature shall make no law recognizing the right of property in man. The schedule then went on to provide that the convention, agreement, and military league entered into by the commissioners of the state of Tennessee and the commissioners of the so-called Confederate States of America, made May 7, 1861, and on the same day ratified and confirmed by the legislature, was an act of treason and usurpation, unconstitutional, null, and void. The schedule also repudiated the rebel debt and declared void all laws, ordinances, resolutions, and acts under the usurped secession government of Tennessee, and provided further that the proposed amendments to the Constitution and the schedule thereto be submitted to the people at the ballot box on the 22nd day of February next, and that upon the adoption thereof by the people, an election shall be held on the 4th day of March next for governor and members of the legislature, the latter to be voted for by general ticket upon the basis prescribed in the act apportioning representation in the state, passed on the 19th of February, 1852, to assemble at the Capitol on the first Monday in April next, said officers to continue in office until their successors shall be elected and qualified under the regular biennial election of 1867. It is needless to describe in detail the further progress of Reconstruction proceedings in Tennessee. On February 25th, Governor Johnson proclaimed that the election had been held and the amendments to the Constitution adopted on February 22. The election of William G. Brownlow as governor and of a Union legislature followed on the 4th of March. On the 3rd of April, the legislature met at Nashville, and in a few days thereafter the governor was inaugurated and the general civil government formally begun. Among the early acts of the legislature was one to ratify the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, and in due time United States senators were elected and provisions made for choosing members of Congress, who were regularly elected by the people in the following August. End of chapter 18.